If you spent any time in the world, you've probably encountered the negative stigma behind straight men crossing their legs when they sit. High school boys will stop paying attention in class, not to talk to one of their friends and fool around, but instead to remind themselves to uncross their legs and start to manspread a little bit. It's one of those things that a lot of people complain about as a dumb social rule. You'll especially see this on Reddit, where people blame this along with a bunch of other social rules that these hyper-masculine macho dudes are enforcing on all of the men. But what if that's not actually the case? What if there's actually something deeper to the stereotype at play here? I know I might sound bigoted by just saying that, but if something is a stereotype, maybe there's something behind that stereotype. Hey everyone, I'm your host Dylan, and today I'm going to answer a question that has popped into the thoughts of 80% of the men in the world at least one time. Today I don't want to make any mean-spirited stereotypes, but to see whether or not society is unfairly enforcing social norms on straight men and how they sit, or if there's something deeper going on here. First, you look at any evidence that supports or opposes the claim that crossing your legs means that you're gay. Then you'll see any social reasons for why the answer might be the way it is. And then lastly, we'll look into the controversial part, which is any biological reasons that may be at play here. I'll take an honest look at this question, keeping my biases out as much as possible, and looking at what the research, the data, the statistics, and the opinion polls have to say in order to answer the question at hand. So the first question, is any of this actually true? Can we really say that gay men cross their legs more than straight men? The answer is complicated. Let me explain. There is evidence to suggest that sexual orientation that affects the way how people subconsciously have their bodies. According to research, men and women both sit different from one another, with the way women sit being defined as feminine and the way men sit as masculine. And with this in mind, there actually is research on how gay men sit. The one study I'm referencing here doesn't say that gay men sit in a feminine way or a masculine way, but instead a sort of in-between ground. Men sat with a more open and confident posture, and women sat in a more closed, while gay men show characteristics of a closed and an open posture. So while there is no direct evidence literally looking at the data to see whether or not gay men sit with their legs crossed more than men, there is evidence that gay men sit in a less masculine way compared to straight men. And one of the ways sitting is deemed unmasculine is by sitting with your legs crossed. This of course brings us to the question, why is this? First, I want to look at any possible social reasons for these divergent sitting patterns. First, I think we should all understand that our current cultural ideas around sitting is a big swing from history. In places like ancient Greece and Rome, crossing one's legs as a man was actually a sign of importance and aristocracy. It symbolized elegance, refinement, and social status rather than masculinity or femininity. But we don't live back then. So in our current society, some studies have shown that posture, gait, and even eye contact are used by individuals to identify other people's sexual orientation after a very brief contact with that person. Someone may exaggerate these mannerisms subconsciously or consciously in order to signal to other people of their group that they're one of you, and so that they can feel a sense of belonging and protection in what could be hostile environments. In the fields of sociology and psychology, it's common knowledge that people will change their traits in order to fit in line with what society deems for their group. Even those that don't like the status quo, they don't want to feel expelled or excommunicated from the society. And so with this cultural idea that feminine women sit with their legs crossed and masculine men don't sit with their legs crossed, it means that differing from these two hegemonic social norms will get men called gay, because anything that doesn't fit with the masculine social norms is deemed gay. Historically, and still to this day, women are expected to sit with their legs together or crossed as a show of modesty and decorum, especially if they're not wearing a type of pants or shorts and instead a dress or skirt. And because of this posture became deeply entwined with the idea of femininity. Men, on the other hand, for the last couple hundred years were taught the opposite, and that spreading themselves out and sitting openly was a show of confidence and dominance. And crossing one's legs in this cultural context was risking the loss of perceived masculinity. And like I was saying earlier, anything that deviates from the masculine norms is going to be deemed as gay. And that's true in today's culture. If you are breaking the masculine norms, you will get the label gay thrown at you. But who cares about society and all that? Let's look at biology. This is the fun part of the video. Is there anything ingrained in humans that makes it so homosexual men are more likely to sit with their legs crossed? The answer is mostly no. There have been studies shown that on average, gay men have a larger hip swing when they walk and less shoulder swagger when they walk. But there is no peer-reviewed, reputable evidence that specifically talks about sexual orientation and its relation to your legs being crossed. This is likely due to the fact that there isn't a large connection between biology and being gay and sexual orientation, at least for now. A few connections between sexual orientation and biology would be that some studies have found that same-sex attraction is actually heritable, with these studies finding that around 32% of male same-sex attraction being explained by genetic factors. In addition, there was a meta-analysis a while back that showed that left-handed people were more likely to both be bisexual and homosexual than the right-handed population. And lastly, some research has found that having more older brothers increases the chance for newer, younger brothers to be gay, possibly due to maternal immune responses from multiple male births. These three connections have some support to connect sexual orientation and biology, but any evidence connecting sexual orientation to how people cross their legs is tentative at best. With all this fun talk about nature versus nurture, there is something deeper that needs to be said. A deeper power play that is going on behind the scenes. This is a great time for me to ask you to subscribe to this channel if you're finding it engaging or useful in any way. It takes 3 seconds and it helps out a small channel. Okay, thank you. One of the reasons I wanted to research this topic so bad is because all the men I talked to about this understood that this is a rule, but no one ever actually talked about it out loud. Like there was one time that I just brought it up in conversation one time and everyone was like, yeah, that's how it works. But it was the first time that anyone in that conversation had talked about it out loud. In anthropology, this is called hegemony, when an idea is enforced by the society without much force or very little force, without even needing to be said out loud. When I was in school, when you read the articles from anyone who has written about this topic, it's usually about how when these men had a time in high school where they were sitting with their legs crossed and just noticed that it wasn't something they were supposed to do. They would see that women were sitting with their legs crossed or with their legs together and knew that in order to be seen as a man and masculine and dominant, they could not be doing that same thing. And they would talk about how other kids in their classes would giggle or make fun of them for how they sat, especially in schools, but really any place where men are in an area, it's commonplace for the ideals of masculinity to be enforced through jokes or teasing or making comments. All this to say is that we think that crossing your legs is gay because everyone grew up in an environment where part of your masculinity was tied to whether or not you crossed your legs. If you crossed your legs, you had people look at you, make jokes about you, and you just felt weird. But in many cases, students didn't even need to say something to you for you to want to change the way you sat. So while there are social reasons for why gay men may sit with their legs crossed, and maybe a few biological reasons in an abstract that might apply to this as well, the main reason that we have this idea of crossing your legs as a straight man is gay is because of the environments that men are in and the ideas that are encouraged and enforced in those environments. Whether or not you think that's a good thing and how men should act, or if it's a form of the dreaded toxic masculinity, is an opinion that you have to come to for yourself. This isn't the only social norm that is being enforced by the people around us though. There's this idea, perhaps less prevalent than it was in the past, that women are just worse leaders than men. And before you think it's just a small group of bigots, there's actually evidence that a majority of the population holds this belief. And the answer to the question, are women worse leaders than men, doesn't have the answer you're probably expecting. You can check that video out right here. And don't forget to keep in mind the power plays that are going on, decide whether or not you're going to conform to the ideas of masculinity, and think controversy. I'll catch you over in this video right here.